I had an idea for a show, but first I needed a table, backdrop, and a host with a microphone. That's me. I'm Thomas J. Beleza, and this is Let Me Be Round With You, a show where discussions are explored through civil conversation. So I found 4 people I like and decided to see where today's topic goes in hopes we can inspire positive dialogue. Welcome to an episode of Let Me Be Around With You, a roundtable discussion about topics some might consider controversial, polarized, or even at times fun for our panel. Now, today's episode is focused on abusive relationships and how they are a growing impact to our society, individuals, and the people around us. I'm Thomas J. Beleza, and I'll be your moderator for this exchange. I'm joined by 4 fantastic guests that I love dearly. We have Gabby Faye, Chris Bauer, Christina Paparowski, and of course, Bryan Radtke. Hey, Gabby, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabby Faye. I'm an actor-producer currently residing just outside of the Big Apple. My parents named me appropriately because I do love to gab. I'm very passionate about many social impact topics, and I like to hang upside down from things.
Don't we all? That's why I started wearing Depends. I was sick of it coming down on my face. That's another time for another story. Let's talk to Briss Cower. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Bauer. I am an avid video game nerd and a nerd in every other aspect of my life, and I'm very happy to be here tonight.
Thank you so much, Chris. We're happy to have you, Mr. Bowers. Now let's jump on to Christina Babarowski. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, Tom. Well, my name is Christina Babarowski, aka Stina, and I really am huge into self-care, so thank you for bringing me on to talk about all things self-time. I'm in the Navy, an actor, singer, whatever. Thank you so much, Tom.
Absolutely. Always a joy to have you on. And now we're going to throw it to the beard of the hour, Mr. Bryan Radtke. Tell us a little bit about it.
I'm the number 2 beard, my friend. I'm the beard next to the beard. Hey, I'm Bryan Radtke. I'm an actor, a writer, a coach. I live in Astoria, New York, and I'm very happy to be still in my apartment, yet somewhere else. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure to get you in here. You can join us anytime you want with the internet. This is the beauty of it. You know, I'm not even wearing pants, and we're still having fun tonight. That's what I'm saying. I can tell because I can smell it. You guys can't, and you're thankful. I know. Speaking of today's topic. All right, we try to have fun on this show. We try to talk about what we can, right? So this episode's position, we need to understand why we're even having the show and what we're discussing. There are several types of abusive relationships. For this episode, we want to define what an abusive relationship is, just so we stay on the same page. Abuse in relationships is any behavior or pattern of behavior used to coerce, dominate, or isolate the other partner. It is the use of any form of power that is imposed by one partner over the other to maintain control within the relationship. Now, some forms of abuse may include, but not limited to, physical, isolation, psychological and emotional, stalking or harassing, threats, economic, meaning money, sexual, and also property damage. Now, these variations can affect all forms of relationships, touching on our minds and bodies in a way that works with people that we work with, the intimate people in our lives, platonic relationships, and of course, family members can be emotionally abusive. Today's episode position focuses specifically on having a mature, open conversational debate to understand the differences in how abusive relationships have impacted our society, the fear of talking about it, and myths of how abusive relationships walk through the motions from start to finish. Now, today's first subject, we're going to jump to Gabby when we talk about this, but I got to create the position of the question. When many people hear that someone is in an unhealthy or abusive relationship, their first question is, why don't they leave? If you've never been through an abusive relationship, this sort of response might seem logical. Here are some, not all, but some of the reasons one might not be able to leave their unhealthy situation. You have emotional abuse, destroys your self-esteem. It's dangerous to leave, plain and simple. Physically dangerous, mentally dangerous, financially dangerous. Society perpetuates the ride or die mindset. Sometimes they feel personally responsible for their partner or the behavior of their partner. And they believe that if they stick it out, things might change. These are not excuses, but mental reasonings that limits a willing mind to make a move to leave their situation. Now, Gabby, I want to focus on how in some cases, society perpetuates a ride or die mindset, placing responsibility on people who are in unhealthy or abusive relationships to stay with their partner or get back together after a breakup because they feel the pressure to not give up, forgive and forget, or ride it out. Is society so powerful in its influence that it suggests we should abandon our own developed boundaries for a healthy I relationship with ourselves because society tackles down on demanding a social norm and making it work? And to follow up, does this place upon us as people to live in these social norms of getting married, go to college, have children, etc., as a form of abuse from a gathering relationship of our community beyond even a one-on-one relationship? So it's a two-part question. Ultimately, is society so powerful that it influences us to stay in emotionally abusive relationships or physically abusive relationships because we got to make it work? And also, is the concept of social normities, for example, marriage, children, college, etc., is that also a form of emotional abuse from society controlling our choices as a whole? Go ahead, Gabby. What do you have to say?
That is a great question. I do think that society, whether we care to admit it or not, does affect a lot of the ways that we think. However, I personally believe that if you live your life trying to please the societal norm, you will end up very miserable. Think about this. At night, every night when you go to bed with yourself, is society there in bed with you? When you look in the mirror, are you happy with the decisions that you've made, with the life that you've built? Regardless of what society tells you, you have to be the one that feels okay with those choices. I can unfortunately or fortunately speak from experience of being in an abusive relationship for quite some time, that there was a lot of pressure for me to stay in that situation, and for a myriad of reasons. And we weren't even married. We didn't have kids. So I didn't have any real ties except that we were living together. And so a lot of people will say, well, that's a really uncomplicated situation, right? That you can just get out of. And yes, I was blessed, certainly, that I didn't have those other pieces, because that makes the unravel much harder to untangle. But there's just pressure of, right, you do feel like a failure. It's embarrassing. Like, how could I have ended up in this situation? Like, how did I not see these red flags, right? You do think, I'm an optimist. Maybe this will change. Maybe this will get better. But in the end, what I realized was, if I continue to accept these excuses that I've made for myself, I will never find happiness, and I will never elevate my life to what I want it to be. And so instead of feeling like a failure, I had to reframe that in my mind and say, you know what? You're a success for being able to walk away from this situation. And I think if more people were able to take that mindset, and again, it's not easy. It's something that takes work. But if more people could think of it from a different standpoint, I think that perhaps we would have a lot more people either alone or in healthy, successful relationships.
And that's the hope, is that we can find ourselves in successful, healthy relationships with friends, family, and of course, intimate partners, and even coworkers. You know, we want to be able to express ourselves and not feel like we're the sun on the screen. All right. Thank you for that, Gabby. That was really great answer, and appreciate you unfolding some of your personal stuff. And I'm honored to be able to have this format for you, this platform for you to do that. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Now, Chris, we're gonna go to you. So I got to bring up a couple of things first, and I'll ask you a question. All right. Abusive relationships come from lovers, family, friends, and even coworkers. No abuse in any form of a relationship should be allowed, absorbed, or even tolerated. Abuse is abuse. But when abuse is done at the hands of a family member, people suddenly have a way of turning the behavior on its head. Cuffs and slaps are father's way of toughening you up for the world. Possession and manipulation only mean mom wants to make sure you don't get hurt. The Bureau of Justice Statistics shows that family violence occurred for 11% of all reported and unreported violence between 19 1998 and 2002. Of these, roughly 3.5 million violent crimes committed against family members. 49% were crimes against spouses, 11% were sons or daughters victimized by a parent, and 41% were crimes against other family members. Now, Chris, when growing up in a household, children are impressionable. The specific age ranges such as from 12 to 18 and, of course, 19 to 24 years old may also be used to classify impressionable years. Researchers used various instruments to measure changeable, to accept or modify attitude and behavior. In our society, would the first line of defense against abusive relationships start in the home, or are impressionable children in a more beneficial way if we had conversations about knowing your boundaries, respecting others' boundaries, and showing these lessons by truth in action?
Well, Tom, I think that's a really, really interesting point. I think that one of the problems with almost all kind of human endeavor, especially in the realm of these kind of like healthcare and mental health topics, is that you can never really trust all the actors, right? You have abusers at every stage of almost every edifice that's been built by any group of people. We've witnessed that in a lot of different aspects. We've seen it, in churches. We've seen it in schools. We've seen it in homes. Obviously, I think that the more we create a climate in which people can have these discussions and can, be informed and educated about this particular topic and what it actually means, I think the better off everyone is, because there's always going to be the possibility that, somewhere along the line, something breaks down, or maybe, pride rolls into it, or maybe, familial piety where someone says, oh, something, your father, we can't be seen as the people who beat their kids or whatever. These are all outside pressures, and there's a lot of reasons why the sort of communication and understanding about these situations kind of breaks down. I mean, gosh, what was it? The Twilight books back in the day, there was an entire, I think, almost generation of people who called that story extremely like a great romance. And when you look at the content of what was happening throughout that story, it was a horrible abusive relationship, and yet it was glorified, and we had made movies about it, and there were people, standing on lines for hours and hours to see them. And from what I've gleaned, I've never watched them, but from what I've gleaned from how people discuss them, the main character is in terror almost the entire book about what the main vampire would do to her if he found out, and he was isolating her from her friends and family, and the wolf guy, he was stopping her from seeing him because he was a rival, and how dare you. So I think that there's a lot of problems. There's problems in that we've kind of made it there's a weird kind of like concept of romance that sometimes gets played into it. There's lack of the ability to really understand that we're properly educating people who may be affected or targeted by people who are abusive, and it's a really terrible thing. But I think that the more we do, and the more opportunities we give people to learn about what this actually looks like, the more likely we are to provide people with the education that they need to understand that there are ways out, that there's domestic abuse hotlines, that there's all sorts of opportunities available to people who may be a victim.
Yeah, and a couple of things with that. What you're saying is true. That's what I mean by boundaries. We have to educate ourselves and the people we care about what is right and what is wrong, and knowing when to stand up for yourself. But more importantly, to have an environment where somebody can come forward and say, I'm being abused, however that abuse behavior is, and not feel victimized in a way like maybe even shunned. That's the thing, right? So there's a statistic saying that statistically it shows that men are raped far less than women, right? Like it's like a really low number. It's before 10%. But then if you look at the real statistic, it turns out once it comes out that somebody came up years later, it's like 14 to almost 18% where guys are saying they got raped. That's an insane difference. I mean, obviously women have a higher number. What I'm saying is though men are villainized for coming out and saying you didn't get raped, come on, you should just enjoy yourself. And if we can create that environment, like you're saying, where it's safe for anybody, including women, to come forward and say, I am being abused in A, B, or C, it'll allow us to at least start healing as a society to say, all right, these things are right and these things are wrong. And it's important to have communication with that. As per the Twilight comment, the moment he said, get on my back, and he literally runs up a hill with Belle on his back, doing a piggyback up to the top of the mountains, and then he's glowing like a light bright. That whole movie was abusive to my soul. Like, I can't believe that was a thing. Piggyback. He's a vampire. Who piggyback? Dracula would never be like, I've traveled oceans of time. Get on my back. Romance. Anyway, subject number 3. Yeah. The attack on our persons within the world of gender comes into play among our friends, throwing out phrases like man up or stop being a pussy. Even the innocent phrases to a young daughter, be more ladylike, come in the form of training. These phrases are suggesting to be something that is not truly defined. What does man up really mean? In context, it's usually when someone is hurting physically or emotionally. Man up. Does that mean those things are not manly to feel? Or to tell a woman or a small girl to be more ladylike because she's telling dirty jokes or burping? Women don't burp or tell jokes? Society has these preconceived notions that our genders have roles to specific behavioral do's and don'ts. Christina, abuse is to control, to alter, and dominate in any way they can deem possible. Telling someone to be something other than their feelings is indeed a form of abuse. Question: what is it about society that places such responsibility on us to control gender-designated behavior? And to add, where and how did we as a community come up with the defining aspects of a man and a woman?
I have a lot of thoughts happening, but growing up, it was just me, my mom, and my sisters till I was about 3, and then my mom met my adopted dad, and he kind of taught me what it was to have a dad, and then eventually they divorced, and I was back to just having my mom. So it was all of us women, and thank God I had my dad because he gave me a positive outlook on men. But I know in many cultures and communities, especially in African American communities, the man is taken out of the equation, and then when he, a lot of them are looked down upon. I had a coworker who said to me, who's an African American male, and he said, the African American male was taken out on purpose, to ruin these communities, but they're not all bad. He's like, we're not all bad, and it's so terrible how society has given them those images. Female versus, I'm also very fortunate because my middle sister is LGBT, QIA plus, whatever, and my oldest sister has 5 kids, so it was like the total opposite. So I kind of found my way right through the middle. I was able to be myself and open. I would even say, I'm non-binary just for, because I'm figuring out who I am. I'm a female, right? I don't like labels. But yeah, we need men and women to come together to create. But these days, how many people are there in the world? I mean, it's just in the US alone, there's 140 million, whatever. I think that love will go on, and I think that we're starting to open up to what love is, and what, it's becoming more fluid gender, and it's a beautiful thing. The structure of, right, obviously white men have kind of put their place in, and that's developed over time, but we're trying to break that apart now. And yeah, so I could go on, but Yeah. People power, because we all start as women and develop however it happens. So
That's right. That's why we have nipples, because in the womb we actually start developing as a woman, and then something happens, and they go, I want to pee standing up, and then that's it, and that's
it.
how
Easy
God does
day.
it. Yeah, easy peasy, non-racial slur and easy. The thing about gender, like man up, or be more like a lady. Some of this also creates what they considered, they're abusing the idea to understand their feelings, and that causes some disruption when you're trying to be an adult. And it's hard to communicate with people if you're not allowed to feel like your feelings are a violation of manhood, in that sense. Or even females, where it's like, well, this is what you're supposed to be doing, and gratefully it's been changing over the years. Like, you don't look at a woman and say she's going to make an excellent housewife, she's going to cook, she's going to have the baby, like that. But that was something that was in our generations, where like the man works all day, comes home, and then the girl does this, and that was insane. And sometimes as we grow up, we continue to hear those ill behavior suggestions. I'm sure Bryan has probably definitely heard it once or twice, like, man up, stop crying, stop, where are you going to be something else?
Every day, every single day.
Every day, he knows. But yeah, again, fluidity, because Stina was saying that ultimately, that we just have to be ourselves, and wherever that takes us, it takes us. And but again, it starts young. Telling people they shouldn't feel something, that's pretty evil. That's pretty, in my opinion. Anyway, all right, subject number 4. Let's keep it going. Woo. Empathy is a valued reality if we want to be there for people we know and do not know. It comes from a place of listening, to keep from upping others after they speak, and to respond in a way that allows them to know we are there for them. Domestic violence is a fact of life in the US for approximately 35% of women and 28% of men in their lifetimes. When we learn someone is in an abusive relationship, the first question many people ask is, well, why don't you just leave? Unfortunately, the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is when the victim tries to leave. This is when he or she is most likely to be killed by the abuser. Homicide is one of the top 10 causes of death for women aged 20 to 44. And more women are killed by their partners than by anyone else. Now, Bryan, no one wants to be abused. That goes without saying. But people may blame themselves or grow up thinking that abuse is a normal part of a close relationships. If getting out of the situation were as easy as people like to think, every single person would leave at the first warning sign. What is it about society that we can help educate and change about onlookers of these abusive relationships to stop simply shaking it off with comments like, I would have realized it way before then, making it hard to even reach out to people we believe are our allies?
I think just sort of like something that's been going through my head throughout all of these questions today is whether people feel stymied by, whether it's societal, whether it's familial, whether it's cultural. The question for me is always like, okay, well, where are the advocates? Where does advocacy come in? What can we do to help people become advocates in situations like this? I mean, obviously, abuse is something that is looked upon as something that shouldn't be talked about, especially generationally. And you can't really expect kids who are, young to really just say, oh, no, this shouldn't happen because of wherever they are in their development. So the question then becomes like, well, what are we going to do as a society to, make the next generation of people know that there are advocates out there in case, they're in this situation? I mean, I think the first thing that has to happen within the relationship, and it is a very dangerous thing, is recognizing that there is an abuse here. And it's very difficult, but until both people are on that same page, it may continue. And once that happens, well, then what? as you were saying, like, women who are women between the ages of 20 and 40, a lot of the times are, murdered by their abusive partners. Well, where do we go as a society? Where are there places that we can have that can teach everybody the tools, so that even if they're, an uncle, or if they are a friend, like what can we do to make sure that these people can get the tools that they need to be an advocate and to help people who are inside these situations as best as they possibly can?
Yeah, and again, that comes down to education and understanding what is out there. There are resources, but how often do you know that there's several websites? There's also state websites. There's a federal website dedicated to abusive relationships. The idea that even the fear of not knowing, right? Because if we have go ahead, Brian.
Well, I'm just saying all of those things are great, but all of those things in some way is passive. Actively as a society, what are we going to do? Are we going to put this into public schools? Are we going to put this in a more aggressive way? Are we going to put this into, I don't know, like, any other type of fraternal organizations or church type organizations that people are in? Like, are we really going to take a stand to say, yes, this is what we believe as a society, and this is what we're going to do to make things better?
And that's a great point, and a wonderful addition to the reality of it is, again, there are passive, avenues, but again, how do we make it more a little aggressive, to at least be in the face of opportunity? I believe if we continue to talk openly about certain subjects, it makes it more comfortable to talk about those subjects. And in turn, look, when I was 12 or 13, it was the first time we ever had a sex ed class in 5th grade or whatever it was. And, when I got home, my father was angry that they taught me sex ed. So, that's insane. But in reality, I needed to learn about that because it's a part of life. It's a part of who we are. So conversations, even in school, are important too, to know our boundaries, to know what is right and wrong. But I want to conclude the show with our final question or position. The position of this episode, as all episodes, is hopefulness. We, as a society, can open the doors to explore any given topic fluidly. It happens today's topic about abusive relationship is more about understanding the dynamics of those within those relationships and how others react to that abusive relationship. Be an ear for those trying to scream out, or simply an opportunity to understand. The question I propose to the table: silence is golden in a household born of the 60s. Women were abused at home. The stereotypical man coming home after a long day at work from the office, ready to drink the night away, becomes abusive. The truth is, we are talking about abusive relationships today in this episode, and more reports are coming out each year on the study of this terrible behavior. Less people are being hidden away in the golden silence of yesteryear. Does this ultimately mean there's a chance that in time, the unhealthy traits of abusive behavior will one day be gone? If not, what could we do to work toward eradicating such evil? Gabby. Oh, wait.
Wow. Okay. All right. I don't think that evil or bad behavior is ever going to be eradicated. I think it's up to the good people to develop skills to be able to recognize behaviors and distance themselves from people who are that way. Yeah, I think that's it. I might have a follow-up, but
if you have a follow-up, you just raise your hand and I'll get right back on you. Chris, Mr. Bauer, what are your thoughts on the same question? Does this ultimately mean there's a chance that in time, the unhealthy traits of abusive behavior will one day be gone? And if not, what can we do to eradicate such evil?
Yeah, sorry, by the way, if there is honking outside my window. I have the unfortunate luck to be right in the corridor for the fire trucks. I personally kind of agree with Gabby on this one, that I don't really think that we're going to eradicate evil or antisocial behavior. It's just not something that it's all down to brain chemistry and the way that you look at like how people trade their behavior back and forth. It's a lot about like philosophy and stuff like that. I don't think that, barring a kind of a thought police world, we're ever going to really be able to do something that as serious as being able to say, oh, this kind of behavior is eradicated or whatever. I think that ultimately what it comes down to is just making sure that people and anybody who especially is, kind of high risk or more likely to be abused, that they have the resources they need to escape from that. They have the education they need to identify it. And that, if at all possible, if you see your friends or the people around you having a new person in their life who is tearing away their support structures, trying to remove them from friends and family, and just exhibiting any sort of hallmarks or obvious signs to do your best to talk to that person, even if it means, upsetting them, because at some point you have to I almost use the phrase man up, actually, go figure. But you do have to kind of take a little bit of responsibility there and at least, make an attempt. And if that attempt is ignored or thrown back at you, to understand that like this is something that happens and you're doing what you can do. And the right thing to do is do what you can do if you think that somebody's in danger. You wouldn't, if somebody was drowning, and you wouldn't be like, oh, well, if they get mad that I tried to save them, you would try to save them. And I think that's the best that anybody can do.
Yeah, if somebody reaches out for help, you got to be there and you got to be able to know what to do. And you don't have to be an expert or professional. You just have to be empathetic. You have to, all right, what would I feel if I was in this situation? I would want someone to be there and help me, and, obviously tools. But everything you had to say was great. You and Gabby added some real value to that answer. And let's go to Stina Babarowski and see what she has to add to the question of, ultimately, does it mean that there's a chance that the unhealthy behavior traits will vanish one day? Or if not, what can we do to eradicate the evil?
Well, Tom, as you said in the beginning of the episode, there are several types of abuse, so we won't get rid of one or the other. There'll always be a degree of some sort. I'm a very social person, very friendly person, and throughout the years, you meet tons of people, hundreds, thousands, whatever, how much you get out into the world, and you're always going to find some sort of abuse. Thank God I've never been physically abused in a relationship, in a loving relationship, but I've been emotional, experience it all. I think that the military is a good example because we're always paired with random people throughout our careers. Like you're always moving and working with different employers. And I had an issue and I went straight to the boss. I'm lucky enough to have my own voice to do that, though. I know a lot of people don't or haven't found their voice yet. And so what I do now for future sailors and people and in the entertainment community, I say, please talk to me about anything. Obviously there's confidentiality, whatever. I try to just be as open as I can and listen. And that's all you can do. I give advice at the wazoo, and I know if people take it, it doesn't matter. As long as they know you're very passionate and you care about them, just as much, if not more than you care about yourself, that you're there for them. That's the solution, I think, to that.
Yeah, and thank you for being an ally to people that are dealing with stresses and abuses like that. To be someone willing enough to, because I know you work with unions and you do a lot of other things, but of course you're a service person, and to be available like that, I commend you, and I'm grateful that I know somebody that has such giving value and elevation to society as a whole. I appreciate you. Bryan, go ahead. What do you got to say about that? Ultimately, do you think it'll disappear? And if not, how do we eradicate?
I'm a pretty cynical guy at heart, but I think with anything, it's never going to go away unless people are honest enough to look at something and call it what it is. So initially it'll be, well, am I brave enough to take the step and call this what it is? From that point, am I also brave enough to take the next step to get myself out of this? Also, for others, it's like, am I brave enough to witness that, my sister is being abused, or, my dad's being not so nice to my mom right now? Am I going to be willing to take this opportunity? So if we can all kind of look at ourselves in the mirror and say, you know what, what can I do to be an advocate here? What can I do to help this situation? It's going to take a lot of people asking themselves that same question so that it becomes a movement, so that it becomes more organized, so that we can have larger conversations around this. But I think if we can all just, within our own circle, if we can all be brave enough to say, you know what, I'm going to be an advocate here. I'm going to be a person who's going to try and help.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to basically conclude this subject and what you have to say. And taking that responsibility is important, to be an advocate for somebody. But ultimately, in one episode, 30 minutes, what is it, 30 minutes? We're not going to solve the issue of abuse and abuse in relationships. But it's important, as every episode, that we talk about things so we know we can. So we can find out how people feel about certain subjects. And instead of a no society, don't talk about certain things, how do we find ways to talk about certain things so we can learn, grow, and elevate? So I want to bring the episode to a close. And again, thanks for coming out to enlighten our audience, my friends. And, through these several different perspectives on this particular subject, I am beyond grateful to know that I have friends in all areas of my life, from entertainment to life in general, and to have this ability to bring these bright minds together and have a completely civil discussion on today's episode. So a massive thank you to Gabby Faye, Chris Bauer, Stina Babarowski, and of course, Bryan Radtke. Thank you so much for being an amazing part of this episode. And of course, let me be round with you. I really love hearing people I respect open up their thoughts to elevate my life and the lives around them. And as this is a near and dear topic to me, I want anyone who's listening to know you are being abused. Remember, if you are being abused, you are not to blame for being battered or mistreated. You are not the cause of your partner's abusive behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve a safe and happy life. Your children deserve a safe and happy life. You are not alone. There are people waiting to help you. There are many resources available for abused and battered women, people, and other individuals, including crisis hotlines, shelters, even job training, legal services, and child care. Start by reaching out to any of these advocate or areas, abusive relationship hotlines that you should take down the number if it's something you need. 1-800-799-7233. That's it for this episode of Let Me Be Around With You. Love and peace. See you next time. And remember, listen to hear one another speak to add value and grow together from the beauty of other perspectives. Thank you.
Oh dear,